Here's another fascinating one. I love this one. If you had a choice between a blank that is environmentally friendly but costs more and a cheaper one that is not environmentally friendly, which one would you choose? Well, if it's a product like a toaster, I'll spend a little more because it uses less electricity. If the restaurant is going to serve organic food, I want to go the one that's going to cost me less. So if it's services, I'm looking for value, and I'm not going to spend more. If it's product, I'm willing to spend more. A dry cleaner uses some environmentally friendly detergents, that's okay. But if my accountant's going to say, I only use recycled paper, I'd say that's great. But if you charge me $500 for my taxes again, I'm going to kill you, right? So that one is interesting, because we're either all in a product business or a service business. And so this really impacts service businesses, because a lot of service businesses feel that they can charge a premium because of this environmental issue. You can't in this economic environment. Yes, ma'am.
So just as an opinion, in the service industry, so for example, it's either a restaurant or a hotel, what's better to do? I mean, in this time, people want to slash prices, but isn't it better sometimes to value add to it and add other things to it as opposed to slashing? You can slash a little bit, but don't slash drastically, because then from there's nowhere to go. It's going to take you longer to build it back up, or you can, as I say, drop your pants even more, because then basically you're just giving it away. So sometimes you have to look at the balance of what you're doing.
We don't want to talk about the hotel. Drop your pants.
Yeah, I just want to have some fun with it.
The short answer to that is, where we are now in this green messaging issue is the public expects that you're green. You're not going to be able to get a premium for it. The expectation is you're green because you're saving money, not because you're being a great environmental steward, but that you're saving money and I expect you to be green. Now what are you giving me for the price of the hotel? And so, a few years ago, I think Expedia or some of the other websites that do the hotel searches would say, do you want, I think they had a click button, you want something environmentally friendly. I'm going to Florida, I want a $59 room or $75 room. Great, you have nice, clean, environmentally friendly detergents, but I want a cheaper room. Now, again, it's playing with the mix. It's playing with the messaging mix, and people have to be very cognizant of that. Top U.S. green brands, no surprise, we just talked about it. Whole Foods, Burt's Bees, Trader Joe's, Tom's of Maine. Fascinating thing about those four is that it's all about touchable or digestible material, meaning things, skincare, food that people ingest. It's all about connection to the human body. People like clean and green. So it's interesting to note that that's the connection there. And Toyota has definitely benefited from the Prius and their whole, think green, their whole campaign has been about environmental stewardship. Now the question is, can that be maintained when dollars have become so important to the public? Corporate green actions, it's amazing. What's old is new again. Recycling. Recycling old messaging from the 70s and the 80s. Recycling is a big number one there in terms of what actions corporations can take that impresses the public. Talking, the talk is not enough. You have to walk the walk. So you need actions, have to speak louder than words. The public will be turned off if all you do is talk about, as it says here, advertising, corporate practices, and communication. So you have to really take action. Who do you trust? Not really surprised here. Environmental groups have always scored highly. This is a good time for them and a bad time for them. It's good in terms of the public is with them and the public is talking about this. The problem is environmental groups always used to control this space, and they don't control it solely anymore. It's being taken away from them. The president's talking about it. You have senators, Republican, Democrat, that maybe never talked about green issues, talking about it. So then the environmental groups start to go down and down and down in terms of being the only one out there talking about it. So sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you is the loss of your enemy. Because what do you stand for if you're not defined by the thing you're fighting for? And they're going to face a big problem. Academic institutions, two things. The thing to note here about academic institutions that's critical is that if you have a product, it needs to have, or a service, it's a really good idea if some academician or some institution has said, yes, I have certified this as a green product. Without that, you're going to lose a lot of credibility. and it's going to cost you a lot to gain that credibility with the public. So you really have to have that kind of good housekeeping stamp of approval. Business associations, it's interesting, again, it's lower on the scale because people feel there's a lot of negative towards big business. And so business associations, people think of that, they tend to think of not the smaller businesses, the bigger businesses. So business associations, and I'm on the board of the Business Council of Westchester, we have to work harder to get the public to believe that our green message is appropriate. Yes, sir?
I'm sorry, Larry, can you explain the academic institution description again?
Sure. An academic institution, and again, this is talking in the general public, what the general public thinks. Academic institution would be, going back to the classics, kind of a college or university or an organization that is seen as maybe a, and again, this kind of bleeds into environmental groups, but like a Sierra Club, World Wildlife Group, you know, one of those groups that the public sees as being independent. And that's really what this means, is what independent voice gives you the most credibility when you're talking about a product or service. And the fascinating thing is, above everything else, when you cut through all the green stuff, they want you to be honest and trustworthy. You know, it's not so much the green, it's that you're honest about either trying to become more green, which is another critical point. You don't have to be 100% green. If you're trying to strive to that, that's okay. But what the public really wants you to be is honest about it. You say, hey, look, I can only get to 90% green. The other 10% has just been too difficult for whatever reasons, economic reasons. The public will believe you more if you're honest about the issue versus trying to sandbag and say, oh yeah, we're 100% green, and then when the public finds out you're not. Again, this goes back to, especially now, an environment with a lot of mistrust of Wall Street, Bernie Madoff, all of this has an impact on messaging that you have to be aware of. So what I want to end the conversation with before we take some additional questions is, our research has shown there's 5 shades of green, and I just want to go over the 2 extremes of the spectrum, because this tends to give you a spectrum of where your customers potentially are right now or where prospects may be. There's 2 groups. One is called the active green, which is about 34%, and the muted green here, which is about 11%. Those are the 2 sides of the spectrum. The active green is about 34% of Americans we would put in this category. They're extremely disappointed in the environmental progress today. This group feels, hey, I'm doing everything. I'm recycling in my house. I'm out there advocating for green. I'm trying to green my kids' school. They're washing cars by hand. They're taking their bikes to work if they can, which I know is difficult here. If they're in Yonkers, they're really building up those muscles on those hills, let me tell you. They're taking efforts to reduce fuel emissions, they're buying the Priuses. This is your true active green folks. And when it comes to shopping, they're the ones that are more likely to be carrying those bags into the supermarket with recycled bags and purchase products that are made of recycled materials. They're very dissatisfied with what's been going on with government. They believe that organizations like the UN do better. However, they feel that, and again, I go back to what I said before, those environmental organizations like Greenpeace and Sierra Club, those are the ones that are the true greens. They really are doing a great job. These are your evangelists. These are the folks that you will see out there talking about how we should all be green. They tend to trend younger and mostly female, live in urban and suburban areas. Now, again, and I put this in here as a caveat because the national average income at about 50,000 around here, that really doesn't play very well. So you have to figure it's much, much higher in the New York City region. 1 in 5 are divorced. I guess the husband can't take it anymore. He wants to leave me alone. I like my bag as it is. I don't want to hear it anymore. They gravitate to friends with similar mindsets. 3 in 4 choose friends a lot like themselves. It's green in the city. Is this your customer or not even close? Is really a question for you. If you're in a total green business and these aren't your customers, there's a problem there. There's a disconnect. So if you want to be in a green business that's going to attract these folks, you really have to live the green message. You can't meet them halfway. You've got to meet them full way or they're not going to connect with you. The muted greens. This is about 11% of Americans and potentially could be a growing group because of the times that we live in, the economic times that are going to substitute certainly more value for the more green proposition.